So here's the thing no one ever wants to admit. Sometimes the Jedi weren't the heroes. Sometimes they weren't even the good guys. Sometimes they were just the guys with robes and glowing swords, making the galaxy worse, one council meeting at a time. And at the center of that slow-motion disaster was a man with a purple lightsaber and zero chill. Mace Windu didn't just enforce the rules, he was the rules. And that should have terrified everyone. Now I know what you're thinking. Oh, come on, he was a badass, he fought Palpatine, he had that cold stare and cool voice, and didn't take nonsense from anyone. Yeah, and he also treated Anakin like a suspicious intern with a lightsaber addiction. The guy acted like the Force was his personal legal system, and everyone else was just guilty until proven unworthy. He didn't mentor, he managed. Like a middle school vice principal with too much power and no recess. But the more you look at it, the worse it gets. He sat on that high council chair like it was a throne, threw out judgments like fortune cookies, and somehow convinced everyone around him that stoic detachment and condescending side-eyes were the keys to galactic peace. Meanwhile, the Republic was rotting from the inside. The Sith were literally feet away. And Mace was still asking for proof like this was a court hearing, and not the end of the freaking world. And when Anakin finally steps up and tells him, hey boss, Palpatine is evil incarnate, Mace responds with the emotional warmth of a damp rock. He doesn't thank him, doesn't offer a second of trust, just gives him the Jedi version of a, we'll see about that, and tells him to stay home like this is some bad babysitting gig. Then runs off to confront the most powerful Sith Lord in history without backup, and acts surprised when everything catches fire. It's funny in the most tragic way possible. A guy who claimed to see through deception somehow missed the entire collapse of his own order happening in slow motion right outside the window. And he wasn't corrupted by power or tempted by darkness. He was just absolutely convinced that he was the light, that whatever he did was automatically right. And nothing in Star Wars is more dangerous than someone who thinks they're too good to fall. In this video, we're breaking down how Mace Windu became a symbol of the Jedi's downfall without ever turning to the dark side. We're talking arrogance masked as righteousness, justice without empathy, and how one man's unshakable belief in his own authority helped crack the galaxy wide open. This is where the real story begins. So here's a question I never thought I'd seriously ask. What if one of the Jedi Council's most respected leaders wasn't a beacon of light, but a symptom of something much darker? Mace Windu was powerful, sure, but was he also the living embodiment of everything wrong with the Jedi Order? The guy wasn't just a warrior monk with a purple lightsaber. He was practically the Republic's enforcer in robes, acting more like a military commander than a spiritual guide. Let's rewind a bit. You've got this order of peacekeepers who are supposed to stay out of politics, live by compassion, and seek balance in the Force. And then you've got Mace, a guy who sits in a throne room with Palpatine every other week, and looks like he's 2 steps away from launching a Jedi-led coup. How did that happen? How did the Jedi's most militant voice become its loudest one? Even in Attack of the Clones, Mace is ready to throw hands at the first sign of conflict. He slices down Jango Fett, like he's ordering drive-thru. No hesitation, no diplomacy, just snap lightsaber to the neck. It's as if he believed peace was achieved by intimidation rather than understanding. Which sounds weirdly familiar, doesn't it? Almost like the Sith's entire philosophy, but with more smugness. And that's what makes him so fascinating. He's not a villain in the traditional sense. He's not hiding a red lightsaber under his robe or planning to rule the galaxy. But his presence warps the room. Every decision he makes pushes the Jedi a little closer to the edge, and somehow nobody calls him out on it. Which begs the question, was Mace Windu the Jedi Order's hidden weakness all along? Was he the flaw in the system that went unnoticed because he looked the part? That's the mystery we're diving into today. And the answers might make you rethink everything you thought you knew about the fall of the Republic. Okay, let's talk about the absolute nerve of this guy. Mace Windu spent more time judging people than actually listening to them. Every time Anakin walked into a room, Mace looked at him like he just tracked mud on the temple floor. No wonder Anakin never trusted the council. Mace practically installed a "No Skywalkers Allowed" sign above the door. And remember when Anakin reveals Palpatine's a Sith Lord? A galaxy-shattering piece of intel that should have had every Jedi on high alert? But instead of showing gratitude, or even curiosity, Mace just says, if what you've told me is true, you will have gained my trust. Will have. As in, maybe someday. Not now though. Not when we desperately need unity and clarity. Then there's his approach to leadership. Mace ran the Jedi like a bureaucracy. His council meetings were less about the Force, and more about who's getting assigned to babysit the Senate this week. He didn't inspire, he delegated, scolded, and then acted shocked when things exploded in his face. This wasn't guidance, it was micromanagement, with a lightsaber. What really breaks your heart is what Mace Windu could have been. He wasn't a monster. He believed in justice. He wanted to do what was right. But somewhere along the line, He forgot that justice without empathy becomes judgment, and judgment without humility becomes tyranny. That's not the Jedi way. Or at least, it wasn't supposed to be. The tragedy of Mace isn't that he failed to kill Palpatine. It's that he never saw Anakin as a person, just a threat, a potential liability. He never gave him the benefit of the doubt, never reached out like Obi-Wan did, never asked, "What's hurting you? What do you need?" Instead, he pushed him further into isolation, into fear, into Palpatine's hands. It's easy to blame Anakin for everything, the fall, the betrayal, the rise of the Empire, but he didn't spiral in a vacuum. He was failed by every person who should have protected him. And Mace Windu, for all his power and influence, was one of the worst offenders. He saw the cracks and chose to scold instead of support. And when it all came crashing down, when the temple burned and Order 66 lit up the stars with death, Mace was already gone. Not just physically, but morally. His end wasn't a noble sacrifice. It was the violent culmination of a life lived without compromise, without compassion. You look back at those quiet moments, the cold stares, the clipped words, the silence when there should have been understanding, and you realize this wasn't just a man who made mistakes. It was a man who forgot what the Jedi were supposed to be, and by the time he remembered, it was already too late. The scale of what Mace Windu affected is honestly staggering. This wasn't just a guy with strong opinions. His choices rippled across the entire galaxy. Every time he flexed his authority, every time he dismissed a voice that challenged him, he reshaped the future without even realizing it. And the Force, it seems, kept the receipts. Look at the timeline. The Council's decisions, most of which Mace heavily influenced, led the Jedi from guardians to generals, from neutral observers to military commanders, in a war they never should have fought. That wasn't an accident. That was a deliberate shift, driven by fear and justified by power. And Mace embodied that shift perfectly. He was strength without softness, control without introspection. And in a galaxy teetering on the edge of chaos, that kind of leadership felt comforting, until it wasn't. Until it created the very enemies it was meant to defeat. But maybe there's a lesson in all this. Maybe Mace Windu's story isn't just a cautionary tale. Maybe it's a reminder that the Jedi can't survive on discipline and power alone. They need empathy, flexibility, a connection to the very people they claim to protect. And maybe, just maybe, the next generation can learn from that. We've seen glimpses of it already, in characters like Ahsoka, who walked away from the Order, not out of hate, but out of clarity. In Cal Kestis, who struggles but never forgets the heart of what the Jedi stood for. In Grogu, whose story is still being written. These are Jedi not built by institutions, but by experience. And that matters. Even Luke, for all his failures, tried to rebuild something different. He understood the importance of emotion, of relationships. He felt the conflict in Vader and chose compassion over violence. That was the moment the Jedi were supposed to evolve, not regress into stoicism with better choreography. The hope is in acknowledging what went wrong, in calling out the rigid structures and toxic mindsets that hollowed out the Order from within, not to tear it down, but to rebuild it into something that can actually endure. So yes, Mace Windu's legacy is complicated, but in that complexity, there's room to grow, room to ask better questions, make better choices, and maybe break the cycle before it starts all over again. In the end, Mace Windu didn't fall to the dark side. He didn't betray anyone. He didn't crave power or seek to rule. And yet, his presence created fractures that the Jedi couldn't repair. He wasn't a villain, but he was never a hero either. He was the middle ground that made both extremes possible. That's the real tragedy. He thought he was doing the right thing, thought his authority was righteous, thought his control would bring order, but all it brought was silence, distance, a blind spot large enough for the Sith to walk right through. He failed Anakin not by attacking him, but by never seeing him, never trusting him, never listening until it was already too late. And when the moment of truth came, his rigid worldview couldn't bend enough to survive it. The Republic didn't die in a single battle. It died in 1,000 conversations, 1,000 decisions made without compassion. Mace Windu was one of its sharpest voices. But sharpness without softness just cuts. It doesn't heal. So now, all that's left is the echo of a Jedi who stood tall, fought hard, and never once realized that the very ground beneath him was already crumbling. And by the time he did, he was already falling. Thank you for watching the whole video. I make videos because of my love for Star Wars and Marvel. I've been asked countless times how I get my subtitles, and I generate them automatically with a tool I built. That same tool can be used here on my website. It's completely free and doesn't require signing up. My website contains the subtitle generator that is perfect for any video. Blogging post, where you can sign up with your email and receive notifications for when I post, and also my 3 channels. Critical Analysis Hub focuses on Star Wars and Marvel movies. Critical Analysis Hub Plus looks at Star Wars and Marvel shows. And Critical Analysis Hub XP centers on video games, like The Last of Us series, Jedi Survivor, and GTA 5. Thank you for being a fan.